Hi, everyone. This is Rob Gray from Arizona State University and the Perception Action Podcast. What I want to do is I just wanted to record a little video to talk about some of the police workshops I'm going to be doing and I'm designing. Taking an ecological dynamics approach to police training. I just wanted to give you a little preview of what's involved with those. At the end, I'll talk about if you're interested in organizing one of these for your groups, the people you work with. I'll give you contact information. You can do that. Okay, so as I mentioned, I've done a few of these already. I'm currently preparing a couple of new ones. And I'm really excited about this because, ecological dynamics, right? Our goal is through training is to create adaptable movement problem solvers, right? We're trying to create people that not just learn to produce one strict technique, but learn to find a solution, find a technique that fits with the situation that they're dealing with. And if ever there was any type of performer, any type of person that needs to be adaptable and be a problem solver in the moment based on the constraints, they're completely unpredictable and chaotic environment, the set of constraints they face, it's a police officer, right? This is a picture from the shooting in the movie theater in Colorado. But there's no possible way we can anticipate and prepare for every possible situation that could come up for a police officer. Right? There's a million different iterations of these things. We need police officers to be able to adapt to these on their own, right? Be able to pick up information, to be able to adjust and adapt. And that's what ecological dynamics is designed to do. So in these workshops, what I've designed is a 2-day workshop, right? So the first day is going to be about designing practice environments, designing training environments with the goal of maximizing transfer, right? I'm going to use evidence-based things from mostly from work I've done in sports, but in some other domains, martial arts, things like that. We're going to talk about how to best design practice, what the evidence tells us about the best way to achieve transfer. That is, have what you practice in training come out during a real event and make you perform better in real event. So we're going to talk about some of the issues and problems with traditional practice and training and police training. In particular, talk about police and how we educate police instructors, right? How we teach them how to coach. And I'm going to talk about the main theory that I'm interested in, of course, ecological dynamics. I'm going to talk about what it is. I'm going to talk about, show you some evidence that it results in better training outcomes in lots of different ways. We'll talk about why. I'm going to try to present, but it's 5 key principles without using a lot of jargon and fancy terminology. Get it down, boil it down to its key things. We're really going to, throughout these 2 days, we're going to focus on not just what to coach, right? Not just here's a checklist of things you have to teach people. Here's a checklist of the scenarios you have to run. We're going to talk about how to coach. So not just what, how. How do you instruct people? How do you give feedback? Talk about evidence-based things. Then we're going to talk about an important concept called representative learning design. And this is really important as police training continues to move towards more and more scenario-based. Instead of having people practice firearms on a range, we have to practice shooting we create a scenario with an attacker and they have to respond. There's some critical issues. How do we know what we should put in a scenario and what we can leave out? How do we work on specific things in a scenario? And that's what representative learning design is going to allow us to do. It's going to give us scientific, evidence-based principles for knowing what we can put in, what we should put in, and what we should leave out. How we can reduce the scenario to make it easier. Okay, so that's the first part. We're going to talk about the background. Then we're going to do an interactive exercise where we look at traditional training, some classic training scenarios for police officers, both firing range ones, scenario-based ones. And we'll work to assess these in terms of their potential value for learning, right? How well they're going to teach a police officer to handle a real life event, right? So we're going to assess them. We're going to look at where they could be improved, look at some improvements we can make, okay? And that we'll go through that exercise. Then we're going to talk about the tools for how we actually design practice environments. What we're going to focus on in this is letting the scenarios, the environments you create do most, not all, but most of the talking for you, right? Be the main stimulus for learning, not what you say, right? That's what where our focus is. We're going to talk about a specific method using the constraints-led approach. I'll talk about the step-by-step kind of logic of it and how we create a constraints-led activity for specific things. And then we're going to do another interactive exercise where we're going to design, we're going to pick particular issues, right? Particular flaws in firearms technique, particular flaws in handling a scenario, right? Coverage, these things. How can we design a constraints-led activity to address these issues, right? To address these issues in practice. So we're going to go through a few examples of that, kind of work together and talk through some of these things, right? There's no right or wrong answers here, but we're going to talk through them. So that's what my goal is for day one. Day one's mostly on designing the practice environments using the principles of ecological dynamics. Okay. Day two is, I put it under Craig Morris's quote, being prepared, not overplanned. The thing that we often leave out when we do coach education. How do we adjust and adapt our training scenarios? We don't want to be static, right? We don't want to just design a training scenario, throw it at people, and keep doing it over and over, no matter what happens, right? That's not good coaching or instruction, right? We want to be adaptive and attuned. We want to make adjustments to things based on what we're seeing. So, for example, we're going to talk about how we can make adjustments to a constraint-led activity when people are really struggling. For example, maybe there's a new learner, right? And that's one of the challenges with the scenario-based training. It can be so chaotic that a new officer it'd be too crazy for them. How can we reduce the difficulty in the right way? How can we scale other things? We turn what I call constraint dials, turn them up and down to adjust our activity. What do we do if people are you have one or more officers that are having repeated technical flaws or making repeated mistakes, right? They're shooting an innocent person in the scenario. They're not responding in time, whatever it is. They're not entering the room in the right way, right? First of all, we'll talk about how we identify those, and then we'll talk about how we can adjust the scenario to target those. And along with this, we'll talk about how we can track progress, how we progress and adapt the constraints in these activities. We don't want them to be just static, as I mentioned, right? So, and the interactive exercise we'll do for that, we'll talk about, okay, here's an activity. For example, here's a scenario-based training activity. This happened. What can we do to adjust it to address that, right? How can we adapt? So we want the instructors and the coaches to be adaptable, just like we want the trainees to be adaptable. The second part of day two, we're going to look at guiding learning, right? The emphasis when I'm focusing on the role of a coach or instructor is not to give people the answer, it's to help them find the answers, right? To guide them to find solutions. So I'm going to talk about, and this is where we're really going to get into how to coach, right? So we're going to talk about when and how do you give instructions or cues, right? What's the best way to give a cue? When and how do you give feedback, okay? The strong power of questioning as a tool, right? Asking athletes or your trainees questions about what they saw, what they did, why, and so on. We're going to talk about using demonstrations, right? If you want to demo an action, how to enter a room, whatever the scenario is yourself, what's the best way to do it? What's the evidence tell us, okay? And then we'll talk about part of the goal of this, keeping your trainees engaged, motivated, and confident, right? We'll talk about getting the difficulty right so they don't get too down on themselves, but they still have an incentive to learn, okay? And we're going to do some exercises, right? We're going to talk about, we'll have a scenario. We'll start, instead of designing the scenario, we're going to talk about what happens when this happens in the scenario. What should we do? When should we say something? When should we give feedback? How? So on, right? So we're going to get really practical with specific scenarios, not just talk about high-level theory. We're going to talk about specifics of how we apply these. So that's kind of an overview of what I'm planning to do in these type of workshops, and I've already done some, as I mentioned. If you're interested in scheduling one, you think this is a good fit for your group you're working with, your police instructors, then please contact me. The email admin@perceptionaction.com is the best place to reach me. To organize something. As I said, I'm very excited. I'm very passionate. I really believe in this approach for training police officers. I think it's really the right way to go. I think scenario-based training is a step in the right direction. Now we need to put some science into the scenario-based training. What should we include? How should we adapt it? And so on. That's what I'm going to focus on. And if you're interested in finding out more about me and my books and my podcast, there's more information at perceptionaction.com. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this kind of preview. And as I said, please reach out if you're interested in organizing something for